Well, hello, and welcome back to the Introvert Wine Podcast. This is still Ksenia, and this is the very first episode of 2026 and season 3. And I really wanted to start the year with something very personal, very current, and very debated. The dry January. So in this episode, I'll reflect on my own experience doing dry January as a wine professional, and I also did it for the very first time in my life. So we'll speak about what surprised me, what challenged me, and also what I learned. But this won't be just a personal diary. I'll also talk about the no and low alcohol market and how these products are made, what is actually available today in the zero alcohol world, and whether it's realistically possible to work in wine while being sober. We'll speak about the mental and psychological relationship we have with wine as alcohol, and finally the very real physical benefits of drinking less or not at all. There's still plenty of skepticism around the no-low alcohol beverages, especially in traditional wine countries, but this category is not going away. We see France and Italy, sometimes reluctantly but now actively working on legal definition and legislation. The no-low sections at wine fairs like Wine Paris or Pro Wine are growing from year to year. Major brands, startups, and numerous celebrities, shout out to Sir Elton John here, are entering this space. So whether you love it, hate it, or ignore it, it's a long time due that you pay attention to this category. So let's dive into the amazing world of low and no alcohol. And actually, I think it will be really great to start with defining what does it actually mean on the technical part. So let's start with some basics. So no and low alcohol are umbrella terms, and for clarity, I'll be most probably focusing more on the no zero alcohol beverages, since that was actually the purpose of the dry January. But still, depending on where you're based in the world, the legal definitions do vary by country and region. So in some places, no alcohol literally means 0.0%. So think about Muslim countries like United Arab Emirates, for example. In others, EU example, it is allowed to have up to 0.5% of alcohol. So it is quite vague, but I'm glad that there are more terms and more definitions and more actually laws appearing on that, because for example, if you take the low alcohol wine, that can actually mean anything ranging from as low as 0.5 to 1.2%. Or even slightly higher. To be honest, for me, it's the most vague category, because even the labels with up to 9% of alcohol, you can still see them on the shelves. And they will have something on them like lower alcohol or decreased alcohol, something which is not technically even a legal term. All of this really does matter, especially for labeling, export, and consumer trust, because it is so broad as a category and so far technical and both legally from actual alcoholic beverages that we do need rules and laws. For your interest, for example, that the countries normally would treat, a lot of countries would normally treat this category under non-alcoholic beverages like soft drinks or juice or water. And well, to give you an example of France, where VAT on wine is 20%, the VAT on zero alcohol beverages would be 5%. So it's a win at least here. So how are they made? So there are 3 main approaches. There is no preference in the order I list them, so you can create your own list. The first one is the dealcoholization after the fermentation. So the wine is actually made normally as you would, and then alcohol is removed. So the techniques for removing alcohol include vacuum distillation, spinning cone column, and membrane filtration. The pros are that it is the closest you can structurally get your drink to wine. The cons are that the alcohol does carry a lot of aroma and texture, so removing it is tricky. The second one is arrested or very, very limited fermentation. So the fermentation is stopped early or never really starts. So you can feel closer to grape juice in some extent, if that makes sense, sometimes with less sugar than the actual grape juice if there is some fermentation happening. And finally, the third category is unfermented but structured products. So technically, that drink has never been a wine. It is often pasteurized and can include additions like tannin acid, herbal infusions to mimic the wine structure. So this is where the confusion starts, legally, sensorially, philosophically. More and more I see that the technicalities and the process is addressed in a bunch of serious wine school or wine books. I know that WSET hosted a series of talks, and if you'd like to have more information, because I'll not have enough time on this podcast episode to go into details of what is a vacuum distillation and what does it remove and how it technically works and how many times do you need to distill. Follow some key opinion leaders or producers like Irem or InBev that actively share information and hold some talks and meetings. If you go to the wine fairs, do go and see and attend the talks on the subject, because I feel there are held at every wine fair there is. And also follow professional press, that's your sources. I'd be bold and claim that soon we will have zero alcohol wines in some theory questions among different exams and certifications. And probably by a bit longer stretch, they would appear at some moment in the tasting sessions too. But let's see when it happens. So second point is, what is actually available? What is the zero alcohol options that you can have at your hand? So my personal experience based on the dry January I was doing was mainly focused on no alcohol rather than low alcohol, because I didn't want to have any alcohol in 1 month. So I'll just list what I've learned, what worked for me, what didn't. Beer honestly just rules. Best developed category by far. Huge choice. Everything you want, everything you wanted to try, everything you like to try. It's very reliable quality and a very satisfying mouthfeel. The only downside, choice could be still broader in some markets, like the closest supermarket to my place. I have only found one no alcohol beer available. The next closest supermarket, I think there are 4 or 5. So if you have a bigger platform, there would be great choice. And honestly, the no alcohol Guinness was a revelation. It is great. It's just good. So moving on to spirits, that was probably a biggest surprise for me. I do love gin. Gin is my favorite spirit by far. I love the aromatic, the complexity. So the zero proof gin was amazing. It was excellent in mocktails, and I would really just keep doing that. That good it was. I also tried the zero proof rum. If you are into rum style spirits, which is normally not my thing, but I was also greatly surprised in mocktails. It offered a lot of spiciness, a lot of flavor. It was exciting. I loved it. So these don't try to be actual alcohol. They do offer experience, aroma, and the ritual. And I'll definitely keep making mocktails going forward. And then the wine, finally. So zero alcohol wine. Also mind that I'm based in France. So my experience is buying this wine in France and tasting the wine here in France. And obviously all of the wines I tasted are made in France, but you can experiment and taste different wines wherever you're based. So this category obviously is most interesting for me because I am a wine professional and it turned out to be the most controversial. So the price range, let's talk about money. I bought the wines that were roughly in the range of 5 to 12 euros because I wanted to, let's say, taste the category that's more or less mimicking the average purchasing of daily, your daily wine, not something exceptional. There are some bottles going up to 30 euros. Shout out to a very famous French producer. I did taste that wine before. I did not buy it for this experiment on purpose. It has its up and downs. I do not believe it costs 30 euros. But then again, how often do you buy a bottle that costs 30 euros? And probably your expectations from a bottle of 30 euros are different than your expectations from a bottle of 5 euros. What I found out also is that Sauvignon Blanc really dominates the zero alcohol wine market, which is natural, I expect, and somewhat logical because aromatics, and we do agree Sauvignon Blanc is extremely aromatic. Aromatics do matter a lot when alcohol is gone, so it leaves you with still a lot of aromas that are clearly definable and clearly can track back to Sauvignon Blanc. What was also nice, because I've tasted some sparkling wines, and I do believe they work better structurally than still wines, because the bubbles and sometimes the sugar, they do add the mouthfeel, and it brings you almost the same sensations as if you're drinking a regular sparkling wine. I've done my share amount of like full tasting notes as a separate document, but I'll just maybe summarize here quickly. So some wines were genuinely enjoyable and I highly rated them. Some lacked texture and weight. Some felt closer to grape juice. Interesting, but not wine actually. So the progress is real. I do feel that we have advanced greatly from what I've tasted 5 years ago, 3 years ago. But consistency is still an issue. So I'll just list some of the brands that I tasted and my scores. These are not sponsored or paid. I bought the wines with my budget, so if you want a receipt, I have it. So the brand that I loved the most on multiple tries is called Divine, and I put the rating 8 out of 10 from me. I also tasted some samples from Chavin, and I put 7 out of 10, and Nifalia, which I rated 6 out of 10. I also tasted a brand called Le Vin, and it turned out to be the one which falls under the unfermented category one. So it was, I think, the one closest to actually feeling as if you're drinking a grape juice, but a bit with some tannin, with a little bit of enhanced acidity. It was honestly not on my favorites list. But as an example, I think the style is worth mentioning, and I'm sure it works for someone, just not me. So I wanted to share with you some of my tasting notes, and I don't want to put them specifically next to a label because I also want you to have the freedom to experiment and define which one you'd like to taste and which one you like most, because our personal taste can also differ. But as a summary, as my takeaways, there are some curiosities that I noticed and I wanted to share them with you. So I tasted a range of styles. I had still whites, I had still red, and I had some sparkling wines. And as I said, my budget was between 5 to 12 or to 15 euros. They were all French wines. They were made in France, they're sold in France. If you're based in other countries, maybe you'll have more selection, but again, as with normal alcohol wine, we have our limitations here as to what you can access. So in terms of varieties, it was curious to me that even without looking specifically for Sauvignon Blanc, I have found out that all of my whites were made from this grape and from different regions, because I tasted some wines made in the Bordeaux region, some in Languedoc, and some I don't think ever mentioned the region, and most of them were from Sauvignon Blanc, even if not stated on the label. For me, it comes naturally because as you would going through the alcoholization process, strip the wine from some of the flavors and aromas. The more flavors and aromas you have initially, the better it is for you to preserve it in the zero alcohol wine. So choosing Sauvignon Blanc is quite logical to me because there's not much you can strip Chardonnay off, so that's going to be quite bland, but it still exists. So most of them were Sauvignon Blanc, but I've seen across different wines that the producers aimed at a different style of Sauvignon, as it is with normal wines. So some of them were even some New Zealand style, like almost too much, a little bit intense. But yeah, they're also fans of this style. Some Sauvignon Blancs were more complex, like layered with tropical and spicy nuances like vanilla, and they were not as screaming as the highly aromatic versions. And then they were maybe not even so intense Sauvignon Blancs, so maybe there was another style the producer was aiming at. So yeah, it all coexists. Across all of them, the acidity was great, but I feel that the acidity is easier for the producer to work with, and Sauvignon Blanc would have a lot of natural acidity, and then you can add if you want. I hope I'm not breaking anyone's myths here. You can add acidity and you will not notice. Also, curiosity, some of the bottles had the vintage, some didn't. Again, the rules are very vague. So some of them had the vintage, some were not mentioned in it, but again, that's out there. I mentioned also that the ones that were sparkling for me had better mouthfeel and texture, even though they were all dry. So all of the wines that I tasted, which I really appreciated and enjoyed, were dry. And one of them, it was mentioned that the carbs, the carbohydrates were at 3.8 grams. So technically, if we're speaking about normal still wine, that's on the verge of the dry category because should be around 4 grams per liter. But again, there are no rules. It's Wild West here. So is it considered an off-dry zero alcohol? You never know. So I assume our sugar levels should be the same, but yeah, who knows? So sparkling definitely were interesting. Some of them sadly lost the bubble very, very fast, and that was not really pleasant. Also, speaking about the sugars and overall calorie heat, I think that's a huge success here. And the ones that I tried ranged from 13 calories to 19 calories per 100 grams, which is super low if you're thinking about a normal wine again. If the normal wine, well, depending, we can start at as low as 79, 80 for dry whites, going to, I don't know, whatever you can imagine, some of the champagnes with more sugar, or I don't even want to start with the categories like Sauternes or Pedro Jimenez. That sugar count will, surprise you. So they're becoming drier, better balanced, nice acidity, integration. The producers are playing with different aromatic profiles with some complexity. So there is hope. They were not all horrible. Some of them I wish were better. Some of them were really good, and I would even try them one more time. Hospitality-wise, as again, summarizing the 3 beverages I spoke about, mocktails are doing great. You can find them almost in all bars, restaurants. You will see this offer. Zero alcohol wine is still rare on the wine lists, but that's changing. I've heard that there was a wine bar in Paris switching totally zero alcohol menu for January. I wonder how that went for them, but I haven't tracked it. What was really a great example is the e-commerce offer online. There was a bunch of special offers and discounts for dry January, and as a marketer, I think it's an excellent move. It was the correct moment to get people curious and actually have them buying and trying the zero alcohol options during dry January. And I'm very sure that some of them, at least it would be curious to see what percentage, would probably be a return customer and purchase later during the year, sometimes also the zero alcohol options. As a wine professional, what was curious to me is to understand, can you be sober sommelier and actually work in wine? And the short answer is yes, because we know that tasting professionally means spitting. Is it sexy? No. But is it realistic? Yes, we all do it. That said, I want to be honest, and I love the taste of wine, and I miss the pleasure of enjoying a glass of really good wine. For me, tasting and spitting doesn't fully replace the experience. It's a personal thing, but I also struggle with the definition of alcohol-free when tasting, because the swallowing helps me understand the wine fully. I'm wearing braces. Sometimes when I taste and I have this burn on my gums, it's difficult for me to distinguish between the burn from acidity and the burn from alcohol. But again, it's my personal something that I'm working on. So swallowing a sip of wine and feeling the heat in your throat actually helps me define the alcohol better. But again, is it obligatory? No, absolutely no. I know there are sober sommeliers who exist, there are sober wine professionals, there are sober writers, and this conversation is growing. And there is a bunch of articles I've seen on the topic, and it's, very curious to follow this debate. And honestly, I'm recording this podcast on the 28th of January with a plan to release it on the 30th of January, and I have already dinner and plans with friends, and I think my dry January will end one day shorter again, because this experience is not only about alcohol, it's the social element, is the social activity, it's drinking and sharing with people, talking about the wine, bringing some exciting bottles and exchanging about these bottles. So this element I really do miss. Speaking about the missing the social occasions part, dry January was, I think, invented because technically it falls really well into our, let's say, little annual budget cycle. We're all broke and tired and exhausted in January. And it was reported by the hospitality sector for years that it's their lowest sales months because everybody splurged and indulged too much in December, both in terms of spending and in terms of actually consuming. So it feels naturally that dry January is dry because naturally we don't go out often so much as we did in December. We need the body to detox and get back to normality a little bit. So dry January as a concept, I think, comes very naturally. There are other months now that are being promoted, like Sober October, etc. But again, it's up to you. Because when I speak about mental and psychological side of wine, alcohol, and addiction, I think that's the most important part of me. And you can revert back to my episode with Mark de Wolf when we speak about addiction and working in wine and alcohol exposure. I do love wine because for me, it's a culture, it's pleasure, it's often a food moment, but it's also alcohol, and alcohol is a drug. So working with alcohol especially means constant exposure. And I know the addiction risk is out there, it exists, especially in hospitality, which is a very high pressure, very social environment. So I've seen examples of people really struggling with moderation, with consumption, with excess, with exposure, and it's a pity. So if you're working in wine, you have to be more careful. You have to pay more attention to why and when and how you consume. I don't think that dry January and sober October are solutions that work for everyone. For me, I personally think that long-term moderation feels more sustainable, and I've been practicing it already for a while. You can call it zebra drinking, you can label it the way you want. Dry January was an experiment. I don't think it will be a rule for myself. And again, I think here in terms of mental and psychological side of it, my key word would be mindfulness. Know why you drink, know when you need to stop, and know when you need to break. And that will be personal to every person out there because you know yourself better. But be aware of the risks and of the exposure and of the maybe unnecessary last glasses or first apero beers or something like that. So find your balance and, roll with it. And, last but not the least, physical benefits. So let's be honest, I will not sugarcoat this. I did have better sleep, I did have better skin, I did have more energy, and I lost some weight without any additional efforts, to be honest. So these are real, and I think probably my cosmetologist is the happiest person in this whole story and really appreciating my experiment. But again, it's up to you. I have had very deep and very generous conversations online and offline with a lot of people around dry January and around moderation. And again, if you need to have more information and more materials, I'd probably send you to explore Wine and Moderation, both their page, their social network, and their training course that they offer, because that allows you to understand more and to structure more and maybe come more to the technicalities of what are the steps and practical things that you can start already on your way to moderation. I did had some backlash and some maybe not so nicely worded comments on the socials whenever I posted about dry January, of people either mocking it or coming at me with somewhat, let's call it negativity. We'll not go to label it as aggression, but that was also curiosity. And that was something strange to me. I did not expect it. But again, on the internet, people are more proactively sharing their opinions. In real life, I did receive either more positive attitude and at least openness to discussion, or at least a curiosity, very sincere interest to understand why am I doing this, why it can be interesting to people, what do I expect, what have I learned out of it. But I do feel that there is still no consensus in the society. And I would say from where I stand, it's a personal journey for everyone, and there is no recipe that works for everyone that can be applied. I do feel that on this journey, you need to understand what works for you. I did my experiment. I'm happy with it. I would do it again if needed. Will this be something that I practice constantly year to year? I'm not sure. Probably not. This is not how I personally work. I do prefer, again, as I said, more long-term moderation and the zebra drinking. I'm glad that I found a lot of options that work for myself that I probably didn't pay attention to. And also, hey, it's a living experiment. I can change my mind. It's totally normal to change your mind. You are not stuck with one opinion for the rest of your life. And what I would probably advise and suggest is, as I said, listen to yourself, to your body, and to your interest, and experiment. Try to do different things and find out if it works for you or not. And if it does, well, great, you found something to hold on to. If not, then you can drop it and chase the next thing. But I'm really happy with this outcome, and I'm really glad also, again, to be honest, that it's over and that I can come back and enjoy some great wines with my friends. So let's maybe summarize and draw some conclusions. So what are the takeaways? Well, first of all, adaptability matters. Listen to yourself, adapt to your lifestyle, to your body, to your work, to the situation you're in, because only you know what's important to you. And of course, no alcohol and low alcohol are tools, not enemies. And obviously, moderation, sobriety, and dry January can coexist. They're not excluding each other out. This category for sure will grow. It's something that I'm very convinced of. Whether you like it or not, it's here to stay. And it's up to you whether use it in your business or pretend it doesn't exist. But let's face it, it's not going to leave the market anytime soon. So also on a calendar note, we are entering the wine fair season. So brace yourself and be prepared. Whether you are at Montpellier Bio and in Piemonte, at Wine Paris or Pro Wine, heading into Vinitaly or Printemps de Champagne or Anne Primeurs in Bordeaux, and many, many other wine salons. Be mindful and listen to your body. And I know spring is exciting. It is also exhausting. We love the season. We love seeing each other, tasting new wines, exchanging news. But do remember some key points of advice from myself. Spit, hydrate, take breaks, and be kind to yourself. And also sleep. Sleep does matter. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, like, share, and subscribe, and spread the love of wine in all of its forms. Until the next one, ciao!